Welcome to Art Salon. I'm Ellie Shore, and I've been hosting Art Salon for 9 years now, since the spring of 2012. Art salons have been an absolute labor of love for me, and it's thrilling to be here doing the same thing 9 years later. I never would have imagined that. Before I begin, I would like to take a few minutes to thank the people who have helped me to make art salons successful as they have, and particularly now that we're working on Zoom, which is a whole new world for us. The first people that I want to thank are the people at the Armory Arts Center, the administration, the staff, and the board of directors. They've been totally supportive for the entire 9 years. I want to thank Ezra Hubbard. He gave us a very generous donation this year that has allowed us to bring an art salon to the public for free. And that's been wonderfully helpful. I also want to thank Vicki Siegel. I see her here now and I want to wave to her. She gave me courses in how to work Zoom because she was already doing it and teaching classes at a point where I didn't know which end was up. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Edison Peñafiel. I've been watching his work grow and develop over a number of years now. And every time I see it, I'm more impressed and more intrigued. He is creating very large scale multimedia installations, multi-channel video, multi-channel sound, kind of fantastical, and I think he's used the word fantasized, depictions of the human experience with a particular focus on the more difficult parts of the human experience as we read them in the news today: war, migration, displacement of people all over the world. And he's embodied this in ways that are human, but not quite human. And it's going to be fascinating to hear him tell us about that. Edison was born in Ecuador and settled after that in Miami. He got his bachelor's in fine arts degree from Florida International University. And he's won some very prestigious awards. One in particular was the Florida Prize in Contemporary Art given by the Orlando Museum. And they do a show every year where they choose 10 artists from throughout Florida and give each one of them a very large solo exhibition within the museum. And then one person gets that prize, and that was Edison in 2019. That was also the year that he won the South Florida Cultural Consortium Fellowship. So he's got a lot to be proud of. It's my pleasure now to welcome Edison Peñafiel.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Ed. And I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Tonight we're gonna do a presentation on my work in the context of perpetual cycles and constructed realities. So I'm going to start with a brief description of these two concepts that have been the core of my works and practice. One of them is constructed realities, which refers to works of photography and in which the scene and subject have been staged especially for the picture, in which the respective artist, in addition to the artist's role as a photographer or videographer, also plays the part of director, designer, or makeup artist, and many times performer as well. In this series, Barrio Alto, which is from 2012, we have cityscapes made from cardboard and other assorted items. Also, the use of light, distance, and different scales to create a distorted composition of what resembles a cityscape. There is a theatricality in the interaction of these elements to accentuate certain aspects of the images. In a way, there are elements of trompe-l'oeil to fool the eye, but not to make the viewer believe these images are real, but to make the viewer accept them as they are part of an alternate reality similar to ours, like cartoons per se. Here you can see some reference to German Expressionism works, especially films, as well as Russian constructivism. These two movements provided the elements of design to create an image that will create tension with the diagonals and sharp lines, as well as an early idea in my work of the perpetual cycle, which is reflected in the repetition of the window shapes and patterns, almost like a rhythm or a tempo. So you're going to see that reflected in later works. The second body of work is titled Los Chupasangre, the Bloodsuckers. These are archival pigment prints. And this brings a similar production idea as the previous work, but instead of using or physically constructing the settings, I use a digital projection as a backdrop. And in front of this backdrop, there are the models posing for their portrait. These characters wear specific outfits of stereotypes of power, like political, economic, religious, and military ones. They are also wearing these prosthetic beaks made from paper mache and attached to their faces with latex. This is the first time I started using masks to create characters, and the first time I started making a specific and cohesive socio-political work. So this interest in constructed realities, which in a way challenges the idea of the camera, of taking a photograph with making a photograph instead, has been kept since the very first bodies of work that I have created. The camera is very important in my work as a device that captures reality. So constructed realities allowed me to construct the worlds and images that I already had in my mind using photography and video, and through the camera, which, as I mentioned before, is a device that captures reality. In this case, the one that I have created specifically for each of the series. And with this process, I tap into the ideas of the news and manipulated information, and so, but with an absurd and satirical approach. So with these two bodies of works, Barrio Alto and Los Chupasangre, I started developing a cohesive idea about what the future projects will have as their core concept, which was to create the scenes of alternate realities that reflect on history, the repetition of history, and commentaries on current times. You can feel some of like Goya type of imagery in these works that I have presented. Here are some reference and elements from art history and classical portraiture that I have used. For example, symbols of power and status, considering scale, posture, the tones used, and also the dimensions. For the next slide, we're gonna watch a 2-minute video documentation of one of the first multi-channel videos that I created, and it's called Correle, Correle, Correla from 2016. So with this work is where everything of what I'm doing now first started. In this work, I'm creating these animated scenes with actual videos of nude bodies wearing paper mache masks and animated charcoal drawings as backdrops. These are grouped in triptychs, as you can see them here. This is another version or installation version of the previous piece that I just showed. So composing triptychs to compose a narrative of the beginning, middle, and end of a journey. In this case, journeys of forced migration. The animated background gives some clues of the story as it progresses, and the characters also give some clues with the way they perform their breathing, which is the only thing that they do. Basically, starting with the beginning of the journey, the type of breathing that they do is very normal. And as the journey progresses in the middle frame, they start breathing with more anxiety because of the dangerous terrains and the unknown. And the final one is a deep type of breathing, like the relief that this journey ended. But also those clues are for the viewer to make up. For example, you can see two characters in the first part of the journey, the same two characters in the second part of the journey, but only one in the end. So you can conclude or make up what happened to the other character. Correle displays real and generalized stories of forced migration from different escape routes, including our own with migrants and refugees crossing South and Central America and the Caribbean to reach the US, as well as African and Middle Eastern routes to reach Europe. With paper mache masks, which are originally from my country, Ecuador, the work plays with the idea of identity. In the case of migration, this taps into issues about hiding one's identity because being undocumented, or assuming another one as one moves to a new place, city, country, or culture as adaptation. And most importantly, the issue of working with fake documents. And the naked bodies bring this idea of vulnerability that migrants and refugees face during these difficult and sometimes deadly journeys. So we have here some aesthetic reference from German Expressionism and old French cinema, which focus on harsh contrast quality and the use of set design and illustrations combined with actual actors to create a surreal world. This next work that I'm presenting here was presented during the Florida Prize in Contemporary Art exhibition at the Orlando Museum of Art. The work is titled Sempiterno, or Sempiternal, which etymologically comes from late Latin semper, meaning always, and eternalis, meaning eternal, always eternal. But the peculiar difference in the concept of the word in reference to time when compared to the word eternal is that sempiterno does have a beginning, so it has an origin, but it doesn't have an end. The characters in this installation are as random as possible and perform meaningless actions, from constantly pressing an elevator button, being seated on a chair waiting, manually spinning a fan, or playing with a toy horse, or also going up and down steps. Basically, all these actions are performed perpetually on a seamless video loop. And with these actions, we can talk about the myth of Sisyphus as the characters perform a perpetual task. Other concepts in this work that has to do with the same idea is Pavlovian conditioning, since these characters are bound to perform these actions that I mentioned, subliminally activated by a soundscape that includes a fading in and out of the tick-tock of a clock. So in this way, commenting on how we as a society have been conditioned by the system to time or to the clock, because everything in society runs and works around it. So we're going to watch a sample of the videos displayed in this work in the next slide. So Sempiterno also brings into the conversation these ideas of surveillance with the panopticon setup of the installation. The viewer can stand in the center and be able to have this panoramic view of all that is happening within the installation. The multi-channel video piece is composed of 32 TV monitors of different sizes, which are grouped to compose different sections, like what we have here. And there's another section over there. One last concept that I included in the work is the passing of information from generation to generation. You can barely see it here because everything is black, but all the power cords and cables are exposed with the idea of creating this network of information that has been passed on or is connected between each different size TV. And this symbolizes the passing of information between one generation to the other. Most of the videos repeat on other TVs as well as in different locations. And sometimes these videos are blurred, like here. So these videos are blurred, but you can still distinct the action being performed. And some others have 2 or 3 videos layers, which are also blurred, with the intent that even though the information is lost, we keep repeating these actions. It's like how different things or information has been passed from another generation, that we continue doing certain tradition or belief or ideology, but we don't know where it comes from, but we keep the same mentality. So with this, to perhaps ask about the hate between 2 countries or cultures over generations, to the point that they just keep a conflict going on, but in the end, they do not know why they are fighting anymore. And they just keep doing it because that's the way that it has been done before. And in this way, it comes back into this cycle of the Sisyphus. Aesthetically, German Expressionism has been a big influence in my work, especially this film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. This is a great example of the composition, distortion, and the division of the planes in sections to create an absurd and surreal world, basically an alternate reality. This is Campo Oscuro, or Dark Field. This work is currently on view at David Castillo Gallery in Miami until tomorrow. The work was filmed in different landscapes between Germany and Switzerland in 2018. It happened that I traveled there for work for a couple of months, and with the need to produce work during that time, I used what I had available there, which was the landscape and the anonymous person that you see. And even though this is a video piece, the composition was thought more as a photographic piece. I have a photographic background where all of this ties together. So we're going to watch a 2-minute video documentation of this piece, which was presented during the 2018 Florida Biennial at the Art and Culture Center of Hollywood, which is a different installation. Instead of 3 TVs, it used 14 TVs, I believe. So Campo Oscuro in that presentation displays 14 different videos of fields where this single character representing a migrant enters the frame, stops at a specific point within the frame, and then walks or runs towards the horizon until she disappears, only to come back into the frame again in a perpetual loop. So this perpetual loop is a signature of the video work that I produce to talk about history, the repetition of history or events, and the limbo state that migrants get placed into because of migration laws. So it is like this loop that they never can get out in some situations. Another important aspect in my work is tapping into the concept of identity. The character here and on other projects do not show their faces or intentionally covered with a mask. The purpose is for the viewer to assign a persona to them and to connect with them based on their own or someone else's experience or story. This next work is titled Ni aquí ni allá, neither here nor there. It was created during an art residency at the Elsewhere Museum in Greensboro, North Carolina. And this image is from the installation and presentation of this piece at the Florida Prize in Contemporary Art at the Orlando Museum of Art. This installation was awarded, as Ellie mentioned in the beginning, the prize in 2019. This is a multimedia installation that combines virtual and physical elements such as sound, 3 video projections on 3 different walls, furniture, crates, luggage, dishware, and ropes. We're going to watch a video documentation of the piece so you have a better idea of how it works in the space. Nyakimya brings back again this idea of the Sisyphus on a perpetual journey through different terrains, never arriving to a destination. The piece is a 16-minute video that develops into different settings, as you saw, such as a farm film with cotton and wheat fields, a forest, a city, a beach, and a desert, perpetually looping back into an eternal journey. These installations set some of the parameters on how I will approach spaces in the future projects. So it is an immersive experience, and also carefully selecting the elements and their placement within the install in order to activate certain reactions on the viewers as they navigate the space. One of those things where if the viewer adventure into navigating these bundles of belongings, they will encounter this dish cabinet with all the dishware there. So to me, it's like bringing these generations of migrations, like this is typically on a grandma's house. So activating those memories in a way. So here are some references again from early French cinema and German Expressionism films with the use of props and set designs, similar to the last piece that I showed. This is Land Escape. This was created during an art residency at 100 West Corsicana in Corsicana, Texas in 2019. This multimedia installation piece composed of multiple digital projections on chiffon fabrics and a fence of text and barbed wire. We're going to watch the last video of the night. It's the documentation from that presentation in Texas. Texas, being one of the states with the most migrant detention center in the US, it was needed to continue the subject of humans traversing landscapes and in the act of escaping. There are three specific elements that aid the development of the work during the residency in Texas. The residency building is a historic site constructed by the Independent Order of Odd Fellows, which is a non-political and non-sectarian fraternal order. I will not go too deep in it, but just to mention how the space influenced the work and the history of the space. So the Odd Fellows will perform reenactments of Old Testament stories. And my take on that, basically I decided to go with Exodus as it is tied directly to mass movement of people. There was a small projection room within this large studio space that the Odd Fellows will use to project images and symbols with a magic lantern like a century ago. So my take on that was recreating how it was used before, but with contemporary elements, which are digital projectors. And the third element are the rituals of initiations that they will perform in the space. So I take this idea of the ritual as a series of repeated steps that need to be followed in order to complete a ceremony. So my approach to this was to perform all the characters myself as a ritualistic journey. These last two images that I showed of that installation are from the South Florida Cultural Consortium exhibition, which was presented at the Museum of Contemporary Art in North Miami. There are about 60 different of these characters that traverse 4 different landscapes that evolve as the character progresses in their journeys. Starting with a grass field and then to a cotton field, and then it evolves into like a desertic terrain with rocks and boulders and a seascape, looking back again into a perpetual cycle of migration. The characters wear different type of clothing with pattern and high contrast, as well as human and animal masks. By referencing nature into this migration and bringing animals into this equation, we can discuss of the innate quality and need as a living being to move and migrate for the many different reasons that could exist. One other element that is important into this work is the idea, I consider the viewer also part of the work and how they can activate the work with this barbed wire fence, which separates the viewer space from this character's space. So there is this sense of division. They are on the other side and we are on this side. And the projectors, as you saw on the last image here, are placed on the ground. So as the viewer navigates the space, they block the projections and in a way they become one of the characters, and their shadows, the viewer's shadow is casted on these pieces of fabric as well. So in an effort to create a connection with the work. Here we have an image of a Panathenaic procession as reference to the ritualistic mass movement of people. This relief sculpture surrounds the perimeter of the Temple of Athena in a loop. So in a way, I like to see these reliefs as an archaic form of video, which relates to my work, but also a translation of the previous project into the next formats that I'm going to show you now. So this piece is also called Landscape, Site-Specific Installation. This is a continuation and adaptation from the previous piece for a public space. This was commissioned and presented by the Bass Museum in their Walgreen Windows space in Miami Beach. This site-specific installation is composed of these large brims. I have one behind me. And these were wheat pasted on the walls, which were painted a solid color that represents a minimalistic landscape, in this case, like a very sunny desert. As well as there is this fence from the previous piece that I use on this piece as well to separate these characters from the viewer space in a way, to create this sense of separation. The last of this landscape series is landscape paintings. This was presented last year between September and November at Piero Achugarri Gallery in Miami. This work was produced with the financial support of the Knight Foundation and the Foundation for Contemporary Art. These paintings are 9 by 7 feet in dimension. They're pretty large. And these are made with acrylic wall paint on canvas, and the prints are on archival cotton paper with pasted on the surface. So the prints are the characters. Also, the work was presented as an installation, even though they're paintings on a white wall, very formal. I wanted to have this element of installation or intervention with this fence of barbed wire in front of the paintings to create this separation from the viewer as well. So similarly to the previous piece, colors were used to create minimalistic representations of landscape. The one on the left is called Abyss, and the one on the right is called Beach. This work taps into art history's landscape paintings, but contradicting the whole idea of it by presenting, instead of a horizontal format, which is the landscape format, I'm presenting a vertical format. And landscape painting do not have a subject in it, and I am presenting a subject in the act of escaping. So that's how I play with these ideas of art history and landscape painting, all of that. So once the space was secure for the exhibition, I started the production of these works, as multiple elements needed to be taken in consideration to be able to produce it, such as the size of the walls, and also which direction they will be walking towards. Also how I was going to place the barbed wire. Since this part of the gallery is more like a corridor, it worked perfectly with this installation or presentation of this exhibition, as it pushes the viewer to walk from one end to the other. There's 2 entrances in the space. And this exit sign was one of the elements that dictated the direction where the characters walk towards to add to the concept of the escape as well. And this is the last project I'm presenting tonight. It is titled Érase una vez, or Once Upon a Time. I started producing this work during an art residency at Anderson Ranch last February. This residency was in partnership and sponsored by Ulight Arts. These photographs are digital compositions using actual images performed for each setting. The settings are constructed from large pieces of paper that I have texturized and applied different tones with different types of paint. Then these are collaged digitally to create these settings. At the moment, I have 6 different photographs, but I think it will be a large collection of photographs in this series. I'm imagining this as a collection of small narratives, like in a children's book, referencing different situations that these masked characters live through. Even though these characters are alternative representations of real people that I have known, they live in an alternate reality where they somehow project certain qualities and characteristics and experiences of the real persons they individually represent. And I think that's it for tonight. Thanks for attending the presentation of my works.
That was amazing. That was really fascinating, deeply moving, just deeply moving. I've seen so many of these installations in person and have felt that every time, but seeing all of them one after another is a very emotional impact, particularly because we're watching stories of people going through these awful journeys every night on TV, and it's just it is endless, and it felt endless watching them. Thank you, Edison.
Thank you, Ali, for inviting me. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming here tonight.